Welcome to another 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation podcast. Today, 10KMA founder and CEO Thaddeus Dawson is joined by economist and author William Michael Cunningham and real estate broker, appraiser, and author Shawnee Allridge. Now let's join the team and today's topic, public trust.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 10K Minority Appraisers podcast. Thank you all for joining us today. Remember to subscribe, like, all of those things so we can get our numbers up. Our goal is to get to 10,000 followers. So right now we're on YouTube. We'll be jumping on Spotify and all the other platforms. Again, I'm excited to be here. I'm very thankful that we have our producer, Rick Clear, doing his thing, getting us all together and keeping us in line. I'd like to welcome William Michael Cunningham, esteemed economist, and Miss Shawnee Allridge, broker, appraiser. Both of these people have books out. Bill has a book, and Shawnee has a book. We'll actually be promoting their books moving forward. I'm a slacker here. I don't have a book yet, but they are encouraging and inspiring me to have a book. It's been a really exciting week. The past week or two, I was invited to Washington, D.C. to the Appraisal Foundation. I was nominated to be on the executive committee, to be the secretary, to finish up Chris Winke's term, and as he moved over to the Board of Trustees, and they'll be voting on that for him to be a part of that. It was actually kind of ironic. Last week was a really busy schedule. I hadn't planned on going to the Appraisal Foundation meeting, and I doubted if I go back because we were supposed to be at the Tuskegee Institute Ag Workers Conference, and then we were supposed to be going to the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. I opted to go to Washington, D.C. because I was nominated, which was an honor. And I'm always telling the students that if you're not on the table, that you're on the menu. So I tried to go and represent there. I left. The best thing about being in Washington, D.C., I was able to spend some time with Bill Cunningham and some of his student interns who were absolutely brilliant. And I enjoyed talking to them about the economy and real estate appraising in general. So again, today's topic is public trust. And we're going to dive into that and what that actually means to me. I believe that the public trust is really sacred, but they talk about reestablishing public trust in the appraisal industry. And I think it's being used more as a punchline because there's a lack of leadership and accountability and no transparency. And I believe my invite to Washington to the Appraisal Foundation was a part of the whole transparency game. I believe the agenda was already set with who they wanted and how they wanted it to go. And again, that's just me being me and a little bit paranoid. And in the space, there are a lot of different things going on and a lot of moving parts going on. So there is the Appraisal Diversity Initiative, which is made up by a series of lenders and other organizations, and mostly the people that are leading the Appraisal Diversity Initiative, I don't believe can be trusted. So we've been invited to be at the table. So we're there. And in my opinion, trust is earned. So what we're going to do today is talk about that and examine it. I'm going to have Bill Cunningham talk about some of the actors at the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. Those would be the lenders and their HMDA report cards and why they formed the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. And then we'll have Shawnee talk about it from a brokerage standpoint and her clients and how they feel about it. One of the other things that I am adamant about is my students. I don't trust my students with the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. Every time they tend to get students of color, they're parading them around and taking pictures like they're show ponies. And I find it extremely offensive. And my students trust me, and not only do they trust me, their parents trust me. And so I will not do anything to violate that trust. And it's just one of the things that how I feel about it. I'm not going to belabor it. I'm going to turn it over to Bill, and he can talk about some of the lenders who are at the table for the Appraisal Diversity Initiative and Project Reach, along with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Well, thank you, Thaddeus, and thank you, Shawnee, for being on the call. Let's start with the definition. So, how would we define the public trust? It really is confidence in fairness and equitable outcomes that are the result of the activities of public institutions, courts, politicians, companies, even. And we know that we live in an era where confidence in public institutions is at an all-time low. As a matter of fact, one of the things that it's well documented that we've researched, it's well documented that public trust is positively correlated with economic growth and with participation in the stock market, but we'll just say participation in markets. If you believe that public entities are looking out for the public interest, then you'll have more confidence in the economic institutions overall. Now, one of the things that we also say is increases in diversity also increase the performance of public institutions, of institutions that are charged with the public trust. Why? Because they get opinions and information from a broader set of individuals and institutions, which gives people greater confidence in the decisions that these public institutions make. If you think about a public institution, a school, a court, whatever, if they're only getting information from a narrow band of the population, let's say white men above the age of 50, and so that's the only people that the institution lists, would you have greater confidence in the decisions reached by that entity versus an entity that gets information from a broad spectrum of the population? No, you'd have more confidence in the latter than in the former. So that's in part what we see is going on. That's another reason why diversity is important. And it's not just a made up term, it's not just a negative term. It actually increases the performance of the institutions that are touched by diversity. Now, with respect to the institution, comment, questions, you want to jump in?
No, you had a nice little run there, Shawnee. I'm gonna let you go ahead and jump in there if you have some questions.
Well, I just wanted to weigh in, public trust, what is that, right? And so I believe that, there was public trust when people didn't know better, if that makes sense. Not saying that the public is uneducated, but it just wasn't something that people were talking about. It didn't become this topic of discussion where people felt like they had the right to complain about how they were being treated. So I think that public trust is so funny because I had someone to tell me when I got into my career a long time ago that real estate practitioners were right down there with like car salesmen. So we were considered to be like sleazy, unethical, and things like that. This is when I first got into business. So I was like, man, that's not how I am. I don't move like that. I don't even think like that. And so we have to work on it. I mean, I have clients that are skeptical about the appraisal. They get so nervous about it. And as I mentioned on the last episode, they are now trying to figure out how can they make their home look unlike them because they know from seeing stories and hearing about different things that this could really impact our family. This could impact what we net, what we get from this sale. So public trust is something that we need to work on. And it's been this way for so long. I don't know how long it's going to take to work on it, but we have to really work on it. I love that 10K MA. We're at the forefront of it. We are just calling it like it is. I mean, this episode today is really like this is heavy and heated. I mean, we're going to be talking about some serious stuff here, but yeah, public trust is a thing that we need to work on. And with my clients, I see it all the time where they're concerned and nervous about how things are going to turn out.
Well, Shani, one of the things from the brokerage standpoint, a lot of black buyers have been steered to non-white areas, which that is one of the things that kind of came up in the NAR lawsuit. And so, one of the things that NAR has been accused of is racism and redlining. But what I do give NAR credit for is they actually apologized. They made a public
Yeah.
apology for the wrongs in the past and are taking accountability and trying to do some things moving forward since the lawsuit, and things have the whole industry is changing, except the appraisers don't want to take any accountability and they want to blame it on everybody else and have refused to apologize for their part in it. And to their defense, which I keep saying because I'm always wearing my appraiser's hat, the system is broken. But that's not their fault that the system is broken, but it is their fault for the lack of inclusion and welcoming environment. And I can definitely say that at the Appraisal Institute, they have not had a history of welcoming us. And it paints a very uncomfortable environment. And just to not to belabor that point, I'm about to jump off of this soapbox. But this past week, I was in Kansas City at the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. So there was probably about 200 or 300 people at this conference, and me. I was the only one, and it was okay because they made me feel welcome, and this has been my whole career. So I'd like to thank Brian Stockman, the president of the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, Brian Gackey, the head of education, Deanna Ilk, and my man Ted Glob, he's out of Arkansas, and he agreed that he wanted to have a couple of our interns, and he said, Thaddeus, I'm going to work them hard. I said, well, that's what we're here for, Ted. We're not here to play. I want them to be able to learn. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let it get back to you, Bill, and finish up.
Well, one of the things that Shawnee mentioned was how things have been broken for a long time. So that's actually, from my perspective, things haven't been broken that long. They've been broken ever since Chicago school economics, Milton Friedman and those guys came to the fore, became the dominant economic theory, is that everybody's supposed to maximize their own little piece of the pie without concern for the public good, for the public benefit. Now, again, that was all Chicago, University of Chicago Department of Economics, kind of a economics of greed and they basically paved the way for a lot of the bad behavior that we've seen. Their theories, economic theories, led to a decline in ethical standards of behavior. Those declines in ethical standards of behavior were excused as something that you have to do in order to compete in the marketplace. That never has been true, but that was an excuse that was used. Now, if you're looking for the real source of a lot of theories, there's an economist I could recommend, George Stigler, who wrote The Theory of Economic Regulation, paper which won him the Nobel Prize in economics several years ago. And basically what he said was that, and this is something that we've seen, this gets back to your question, Thaddeus, about what happened. Well, what happened is that the regulatory authorities were captured by the entities that they were ostensibly supposed to regulate. So they were captured because the politicians that manage these institutions were captured by and were more sensitive to the interests of the large financial institutions than they were sensitive to what's in the public interest. And we've seen that time and time and time and time again. And Stigler's theory captured how that occurs and why that happens. If the politicians who are the supervisors of these regulatory entities have been captured by the large financial institutions, it means that the people that they put into place to manage and operate these regulatory institutions are going to be those who have been selected by the large financial institutions. Anybody with an independent perspective, a real interest in the public, is probably not, like Thaddeus, like myself, is probably not going to be selected to be the head of FDIC, right? It's probably not going to happen because they know you're not going to look out for only the interests of the financial institutions in the industry, but you're going to be concerned with the broader public interest. And remember how we define the public interest. It's increasing confidence in the fairness and justice of decisions and policies made by those institutions. And we know that the trust crisis that we have is because the public realizes that they can no longer trust the decisions that are made by these regulatory entities to be fully and completely in the public interest, only in the public interest. They know that these guys are looking out for the interest of these financial institutions and not so much for the interest of the public.
Bill, can you speak a little bit about the Honda report and the performance of the banks that make up the Appraisal Diversity Initiative? Talking about Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, Three-Fifths Bank, and all the other people that are around the table.
Well, remember, and this is the way this works. Remember, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data was started because back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, when we looked at discrimination in the home mortgage market, the large financial institutions said, well, what data? Where's the information? Where's the data so that you can prove that we've been discriminating? Now, the proof was obvious, but they kept insisting that we had to have numerical data that would showcase the level of discrimination. So one of the guys that started the initiative for HMDA was Andrew Brimmer, the first Black on the Federal Reserve Board. He said, all right, well, if you want to show that, then what you're going to need is you're going to need a database that shows the outcome of every home mortgage loan application in the United States of America across all entities and all institutions. So remember, we talked about regulatory capture and how regulatory institutions that are supposed to look out for the public interest are captured by those that they regulate, in this case, large financial institutions. So one of the ways that they're captured is they keep insisting on differing levels of proof. You have to prove that there's discrimination in a marketplace where the discrimination is obvious. You know that they're discriminating, but they say, okay, if you were really regulating in the public interest, you wouldn't listen to that argument. You would determine other ways to determine discrimination. So what happened was Andrew Brimmer, the first Black on the Federal Reserve Board, said, well, if we're going to look for discrimination in this marketplace, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to develop a database of every home mortgage loan application from every financial institution in the United States of America. That's one way, somebody comes into a bank, credit union, a mortgage broker, they apply for a loan. What happens to that loan? You capture information on their gender, race, neighborhood, all of that sort of stuff. So that was the idea behind the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act database. Now, here's where the regulatory capture comes into place. When the initial Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data was collected, it clearly showed racial discrimination. Clearly, it was not even a question. It was absolutely obvious. So what did the banks do? The banks and the industry started to figure out ways to exempt certain parts of their activities from Home Mortgage Disclosure Act database disclosure. One of the things they did was they made it possible for very small banks to not report HMDA data. So that was the first thing. If your bank is less than 100 million in assets, you don't have to report, Well, that's problematic, And then there were other different types of institutions that they got exemptions for. So what that means is that instead of having a fully comprehensive home mortgage disclosure database that shows the status of and what happened to every home mortgage loan application filed in a certain year, you started to have these holes in the database. There were certain things that didn't, as opposed to the initial database, which was brilliant and which we used to absolutely show racial discrimination in the home mortgage marketplace, you started to have some gaps in the data, and that made it more difficult to absolutely prove racial discrimination. Now, when it gets to the entities that you mentioned, part of your evaluation criteria has to be where those institutions are in terms of requiring an uninterrupted, full data set, full collection, the status and outcome of every home mortgage loan application made in the United States of America over a given time period. You want to capture data on each and every one. Somebody came in. What happened? Did they get the loan? Did they not get the loan? Did they get the loan and they decided not to accept it? What happened? That's what you need. And that's what we had at the start of the HMDA data collection experiment. Again, because of regulatory capture and because of the self-interest of some of these large financial institutions, we no longer have we still have it's a pretty good data set. Don't get me wrong. It's good. It's better than nothing. But it needs to be more complete. And finally, I'll end up with this. One of the other things that one of the other reasons why you know that the public interest is not fully being protected is because the second database that we worked on getting was a small business loan database. Wanted the same thing for home mortgage that you have for home mortgage applications, wanted the same thing for small business loan data. So somebody comes into a bank, they try to take out a loan to start a small business or to finance a small business. What happens? What happens to that loan application? And you also want to collect information on the status of the person coming in. Are they low income? Are they black? Are they white? Are they male? Are they female? That same sort of data is important to collect. Well, banks fought the collection of that data until 2025. I mean, the original proposals to collect that data occurred some 20 years ago. And we're just now getting to the point where we can begin to think about collecting some of that data. And that was under the prior administration. My sense is that's all going to go away. That's one of those things that is going to go away under the new incoming administration as some type of regulatory burden. Oh, you're putting a burden on. No. These companies are lucky to operate in the best economy, best country in the world. The least they can do is to provide information on their activities in this way so that we can determine what's going on and also develop alternative sources of financing. See, that's the issue with the home mortgage data set also. And one of the reasons why the large financial institutions have fought to keep it from being complete is because, if you have that data and if you can identify a financial institution that, let's say they get 1,000 loans from home mortgage loans from black people and they make 2 mortgage loans, well, you shouldn't be dealing with that financial institution. And you should be telling everybody else, hey, these guys got 1,000 applications from black people. They made 2 loans. We don't care what's up with that. We don't, whatever, fine, go someplace.
But Bill, that's the smoke and mirrors that they do with the lack of accountability. That's the same thing with the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. They will tell you, oh, we've given out 800 scholarships. Well, how many people finished the program? How many jobs did you create? Scott DiBiase from the Appraisal Institute, somebody asked him in Washington, D.C. Last week, had he heard of the 10,000 Minority Appraisers Foundation and me? And he said, oh, yes, they're in their infancy. We might be in our infancy, but in our infancy, we've placed 6 people into permanent jobs on a career path, and we placed 21 students into summer internships with no resources. So you all have gotten over $5 million with no results, no accountability, and now they're about to get another $5 million for PARIA, which is another sham game, and everybody's talking about PARIA. And you got the whole group following the crowd. You've got everybody talking about it. And the appraisers, there is no way that they got a whole list of people who have licenses and can't get experience. Now you're going to give them credit for virtual experience when they've never even appraised anything. So again, the appraisal model is broken. It's dishonest. Everybody's saying everything else everybody else is saying. They're regurgitating and repeating. And I'm going to ask what your opinion on Bill is, what HUD is doing, and what you feel about Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae in their positions in the space, but everybody is celebrating the Appraisal Foundation's finding of no finding from the appraisal from HUD that they haven't been guilty of discrimination or discriminatory practices, and everybody is celebrating like that's really something big. And I'm confused, like, what the hell are we celebrating here? And then you got everybody signing on talking about how wonderful that is. Maybe it's me, but I don't see that it's nothing to be celebrating. And then everybody is, as I've been traveling and talking to people, everybody is so distraught about the election and the results. And there's just a lot of people that are really unhappy about it. But my whole thing with that is, at some point, they won, you didn't win. What are you going to do for the next 4 years? Cry? I don't think so. And it's all about how you want to spend your energy. One thing I can appreciate about them is they gave you Project 2025. They told you what they was going to do. All I need to know is what the game is, and then I'm going to figure out how to play it. We've been surviving. We've been thriving regardless of who's in office. And it doesn't matter who's in office. The economic wealth gap has not changed by 1% for Black people in the last 30 years, regardless of who's in office. So it's really not going to change. People have been asking me, well, what about your program? Are you scared? No, I'm not scared. I don't move in fear. I was given a vision to do this. It's time to do this. Have we gotten any resources to do this? No, we haven't gotten any resources. All the resources have gone to the Appraisal Institute and the poverty pimps who are now showing up to get money for this, for things that they do not know how to do, things that they cannot do. Is bias sensationalized? Now, I would have said no, it wasn't a while back, but now we got a lot of bad actors out here trying to get funding for bias when they're just gaslighting. They don't have a plan. They've never done an appraisal. Why would you give HUD? Why would you give organization $500,000 that never done an appraisal to fight appraisal bias? Wells Fargo, why would you commit $5 million to the poverty pimps to fight appraisal bias when they've never done an appraisal? So again, it's, oh, we spent the money, but you spent it on what? What did you do? How did you have an impact? Oh, we're going to give the Appraisal Institute another 4 years and no accountability and several $1 million to develop Paria. And so people say, I'm angry. I am angry about the silliness. So I'm gonna let you go ahead, Bill, and I'll come back.
And then I want to get Shawnee in on this also. I mean, again, that is why the regulatory capture theory perfectly explains what's going on. You asked about HUD, Freddie, and Fannie. Remember, we in '91 created the first Fannie Mae mortgage-backed security backed by loans from Black-owned banks as a way. That was the start of impact investing. We helped to start targeted impact investing. And it worked like a charm until greedy institutions like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers came into play, and they basically wrecked the entire effort and damaged themselves. It was kind of a little funny watching them wreck the market because we knew they were going to damage themselves at the same time. So the bottom line is that restoring public trust, the issue is with public trust. Regaining public trust and confidence is an ongoing objective. To get there, it requires creating a transparent economic environment that facilitates growth, whether for small businesses or large entities. And to foster an environment conducive to growth, government and business leaders, there's certain things that they need to do, part of which is what you're doing here with 10K. Leon, go down to the next part. Obviously, I'm reading off of a paper that we researched, that we talked about. But clearly, your efforts at Minority 10K are part of what needs to be done in order to restore and regain public trust in the global economy. So, you basically need to establish an inclusive environment for small and medium-sized entities. That's not going to be something under the incoming administration. If you don't think that they're going to favor large entities, then you're not really paying attention. They're going to favor large entities because they can get paid. They can maximize revenue to themselves by favoring those large institutions. How do you know that? Well, look at some of the people that he's close to. Amazon, uh, Elon Musk, not small entity people, you know. So you're going to see more and more of that, and that's going to be problematic, we think. Again, I'm going to talk about the outlook for minority businesses and kind of what the outlook is in some later talks, December 10th with NARAP, but also we'll probably do our own webinar. But that's kind of the bottom line. You can look at what this guy has favored in the past and come up with the projection as to what they're going to favor going forward. And it's going to be large entities, large institutions, both from look at the people that they proposed as managers of regulatory institutions. Are these people looking out for the public trust? No, they're looking to line their own pockets, and they're looking to support the interests of large commercial entities, which is fine. Just say that. And this is, again, you're exactly right about Project 2025. They told you that that's who they're going to favor. They're not going to favor the public interest. They're going to favor the interests of large, mega financial institutions under some type of theory that somehow rich people know better how to run a government than anybody else. First thing to keep in mind is that a government is not a business. You're not supposed to run a government like a business. To do so is silly. Governments have the public interest at the core of their mission. Private entities have private interests at the core of their mission. The two are fundamentally incompatible. So that's how we know what's kind of coming down the pike here. Now, on HUD, Freddie and Fannie, and you also saw the individual that was selected to run HUD. Now, is that a competent individual who is capable of looking out for the public interest? I don't know. I don't think so. Just based on experience, based on education experience. What kind of experience does this person have looking out for the public interest? Not much. They have experience looking out for their little pie, their little piece of the pie. Absolutely. And that's what they should do. They shouldn't be running one of the largest federal agencies. They should be running their own little company, trying to maximize profits, as opposed to what we do over here at Creative Investment Research, which is try to maximize the value of human life, try to maximize social value in toto. No, we've got some issues going forward, but as you correctly point out, we always have issues in this country. We have for 400 years. Look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, for crying out loud. If you want to understand the journey that we've been on, even when we do things brilliantly, even when we do things absolutely correctly, what happens? They get jealous and they come in and they bomb the city. I mean, for crying out loud. And Tulsa is one of 400 cities that have experienced similar impacts, similar negative behavior on the part of their majority neighbors, their majority friends and neighbors. 400 times that's happened in the country. So yes, we persevere and we survive. But the last thing I'll say is this. I think this administration is going to be different. I think it's going to be I think you're underestimating the level of negativity that's going to come out of this incoming administration. Why? Let me give you an example. Go ahead.
I didn't say anything. I was letting you finish, though.
All right, very good. So why? Because if you try to forcibly remove 20 million people from a country, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up killing 2 million of that 20 million. Just because it's hard to get 20 million people out of a country. It's really hard, and it's hard even if you have the best of intentions and the best of experience. And you're talking about people whose intentions are suspect and who have no experience putting into place policies that move 20 million people to do anything. So, except for buy a cheap trinket or some shoes or something like that online, but no real competence or experience. What's that going
But
to
Bill,
do?
that's who the people voted for. So
No,
that's
no,
what
I
we
don't think.
have.
Take a look at our review. I don't agree with that. I think that when it all is said and done, and when we take a look at what happened, the election outcomes are suspect to me across a number of dimensions, administratively, voter roll wise, misinformation being spread in social media platforms, X and others, before the election, and foreign interference, which we know has been a fact of life. So I think when you actually run through it, I think what you're going to find out is that no, this was not a fair election. This was not an objective decision on the part of a population that's been damaged, that has been subject to fear and hatred and unreasonably. So I hear you. I hear you. And let me say, I could be wrong. I'm not, but I could be wrong. So,
I'm not saying you are wrong, but I'm saying
okay.
as the situation stands today, it's what we have and what we have to deal with. So for me, tears and sweat are made out of the same material. So it's time to stop crying, roll up our sleeves, and get to work. So that's what I'm trying to do is get to work. And I don't expect to get any funding from any of these institutions. So like we always did, we're going to have a rent party. We're going to have a car wash, bake sale, cut grass. We're going to do crowdfunding. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the necessary funding to launch our appraisal apprenticeship program. And in addition to that, get these kids these summer internships. So when we started this whole organization, 10,000 Black Appraisers, it is a for-profit appraisal management company that was designed to articulate reconsideration of value to people of color. So we will do reconsideration of value for anyone who wants a reconsideration of value. We started off doing a lot of reconsideration of value for the National Community Resource NCRC. We did a lot of stuff for NeighborWorks, and I've done a lot of reconsideration of value for a lot of organizations. We were at the forefront of reconsideration of value being pushed forward, and so I've done several, almost probably at least 1,000 cases of reconsideration of value over the years, over my career, uh, and it's been offering the people an opportunity and developing that public trust. So what we will be doing is offering the reconsideration of value for people for making a donation to 10K MA. We'll be able to do that. It'll be coming up on our website. We'll be selling our merchandise on our website, online store. So this mission is too big and it's too important. So we'll get it from the culture. We'll get it from the people. The organization was designed for the people. And at some point, we like working with you and your interns, working with my 1890 interns, we have to be able to tell the story. And right now, our interns are working on taking note of all the new cabinet appointments. We're examining the 2018 Farm Bill. So we'll be examining what's going on in the economy with our students and what the impact is. And we will be releasing our report come first of the year on our outlooks and predictions. And we are excited to be doing that in the space. Again, there's been no accountability, especially when it comes to Black and brown people in the space. And there's been a plethora of bad actors. And so I believe what we will be able to do with the reconsideration of value, now this is something that the poverty pimps won't be able to offer because they're not subject matter experts. They just want to go around gaslighting, talking about bias with no solutions. This is a part of our solution in the space. And this gives the appraisers an opportunity to explain their work. We don't just jump to bias. We get to offer the reconsideration of value, but in offering that, the argument needs to be objective and it needs to be clear. So the appraiser gets to explain his work, but also the borrower gets to explain their discontent with the process. And we're able to suss through and make sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody. So we can then turn and offer those opinions to the bank with subject matter experts. And this is what is needed in the space. So trust is earned. And I do not believe the Appraisal Diversity Initiative, the Appraisal Foundation, the Appraisal Institute has earned the public's trust. It hasn't earned the appraiser's trust, and it definitely hasn't earned the trust of Black and brown people. Uh, the closest thing that they ever had to change and inclusion was Cindy Chance, the CEO with the Appraisal Institute, who led the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. And I respectfully disagree with her. I don't understand how you could lead the Appraisal Diversity Initiative and then write 3 articles about bias being sensationalized. Well, they fired her, and nobody's talking about that in the industry. That is like, let's be quiet, let's sweep it under the rug. Sandra Winters asked for a survey this past week of the Appraisal Institute for an accountability of or an audit on why they fired Cindy Chance. Well, it's been crickets on that whole front. Again, we're talking about public trust. The Appraisal Foundation nominated me to go to be on the executive committee, and again, I was honored. But they chose a house appraiser. Well, um, that's all well and good because I'm a field appraiser. There's a difference between a house appraiser and a field appraiser. So being a field appraiser, I want to be the best field appraiser. So I went to the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers because that's how we're going to teach our kids how to appraise from the outside in. Rural, underserved communities. Once you learn how to appraise the land, then the house is easy. You can go from the field to the house, but it's hard to go from the house to the field if you don't have the requisite skill set. So those are the kind of things that we are trying to do to ensure that our students are set up for success. We're teaching evidence-based, data-driven market analysis. That's going to be imperative. That is where you remove the bias from the appraisal process. The appraisal process is broken and lends itself to subjectivity. Now, a lot of the appraisers that are talking about bias, the so-called thought leaders, when they address it, again, there's no accountability. They address it from a paternalistic, privileged viewpoint. So, like father knows best. No, you don't know what's best for us. You don't know what's experienced in the community. So 10K has been leading the appraisal industry since we showed up last year. They won't say we've been leading, but since we got there, I gave them 2 solutions. I gave them a short-term solution and a long-term solution. Before I showed up, nobody was talking about educating the next generation. They absolutely weren't. I said, let's train the next generation. Then somebody took a takeoff on that. Well, let's empower the next generation. And then somebody else, well, let's welcome the next generation. I constantly get up there and I hit the drum about cultural competency and intentionality. Nobody was talking about cultural competency and intentionality before I got there. Nobody's still talking about it. Although there's one guy that's got a 3-hour class on cultural competency, which I find hilarious, but okay. If you can be culturally competent in 3 hours, I guess my 58 years on this planet is meaningless. But that's just me. So these are the things that I see trust-wise and moving forward, what will need to happen in order for us to advance. We are here and we are not going anywhere. So the opportunity for us to be able to articulate our own research, not report something else that somebody else regurgitated and gave to us. So when I go to the Appraisal Foundation, everybody is saying the same thing, blah, 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 blah. And so there was somebody, I was in an AQB meeting. Again, somebody talked about, are we doing something with the HBCUs? Now, last year, their mission with the HBCUs was Morehouse. Well, everybody ran down to Morehouse. That's all well and good. There's 104 HBCUs. Morehouse just happens to be one of them, but nobody is being held accountable and knowing what anybody else is doing. There was no college outreach until I started. Now everybody is making a feeble attempt at the college outreach. And I got so tickled in the AQB meeting because somebody said, what about the HBCUs? Somebody said, well, I've been calling them. They're not calling me back. They're not going to call you back. They don't call me back. You got to go show up. And they still ain't going to call you back. And so the success that we've had is because we meet people where they are. We work with the people. We go to the Black Farmers Bar. We go to the Federation of Southern Co-op. We go where the people are and where we are needed and we are welcome. And we will continue to do that work. We'll proudly do that work. And like I said before, we're going to wash cars, cut grass, have a bake sale, crowdfunding, whatever it's going to take to get the funding necessary to make these things happen for our children so they can have the opportunity. And so with that, I'm going to shut up and let Shani talk. Bill, me and you have talked way too much and didn't give Shani enough runway.
Well, I want to say that you all's insight is incredible. So to listen to what you all have to say, it's a big deal. But for the viewers, I want to share something with them because, you don't know what you don't know. So appraisers, we have standards, right? We have standards. We have to take these courses, get our education, so that we are practicing this appraisal industry properly. And so it's called USPAP. So we have standards that we have to adhere to. And so with those standards, the purpose of the USPAP is for to ensure that us as appraisers are doing things a certain way. So it's independent appraisals, we have consistent information, being objective, like what you mentioned, that, credible, accurate, reliable. That's what we are supposed to be doing. And we are literally taking these courses to continue to have our licenses in our respective states. Are we adhering to that? Are there measures in place to make sure that we are adhering to that? Not so much. I believe that overall, the powers that be believe that the general public is ignorant. And so because we're ignorant, we're not going to challenge anything. We're going to complain about it, but we're going to lie down, right? And the whole the bigger objective of what we're trying to do here is to bring about an awareness, to wake people up. Wake up and realize that actually you can do something about it. You can raise your hand. You can, you can argue that value with the reconsiderations of value. It's about empowering people. And so like when they say they've gone to the different colleges and things like that, well, they've spoken to the different colleges. Like you mentioned, you have to show up and you have to show them that you care and you want to, do things to support them or empower them. So making those phone calls, it's really back to being kind of grassroots because the public trust. Now, and I believe that's public trust too. So I have to disagree with you on that. There is public trust, but that is for a specific group of people.
No, that is because they trust us. They trust us. That's where the trust is. And the age-old institutions who are supposed to be trusted have not done a very good job. When I look at these older organizations, these legacy organizations, and talking about how long they've been around, well, what have you done? Because the impact, I'm not seeing it. So if you've been the leading black brokerage for 75 years, what have you done? Why are people still
the positive
suffering?
impact?
Why is it, if you've been a black appraisal organization around since 1956, why are there no more black appraisers? So for me, there cannot be success unless you have successors. So I say it again, you cannot have success without successors. Where are your receipts? Who have you developed? Who have you made a way for? And our whole goal is to make a way, and we've been making a way out of no way. And I'm extremely proud of that. and we will continue to make a way because we are on a mission and we have things to say and things to do. And Bill, it's 3:00. I know you got a hard stop. So I'm gonna stop and let Rick edit, and I'm gonna let you go ahead and say if you got. So I got two more things to say. Well, we talked about music, so we always want to talk about the song or the artist of the week. So for me, I got two this week though because I was at the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. I got turned on to my man Blaine Howard on some country, so I feel like I'm growing. But then Kendrick, he did it again. He dropped his Gen X this week, Bill. I know you don't like the hippity hop, but Kendrick represents the culture like no other. So I'm gonna encourage
Man,
you
you're so
to listen to my man
eclectic.
Blaine Howard because I really enjoyed him. And I'm gonna go ahead and switch it up and get you. You gotta listen to Kendrick, Bill. Kendrick is it. So Kendrick started with a K too. So the K's taking over to 2024. We moving into 2025. The K's is representing the culture. It started with Cat, then it was Kendrick. Kamala took the L, but 10K, we coming back strong. We gonna kick the door in next year. We've been banging on it, and then Kendrick just finishing up strong with the Gen. You gotta. I don't even like. I know you don't like it, Bill, but go ahead and put it in there and just see what Kendrick talking about, and then check out my man.
Bill said.
Yeah, on your advice, I certainly will take a look at it. I'm not making any promises, but I certainly will give it a listen or two, just kind of find out what's going on. No, I don't have anything other than I do have to hop. I just want to thank you and Shawnee for having me on this call. Number one, number two, I also want to thank your production team for what they do. The production setup is very good. And number three, certainly we're going to have to keep walking down this path. I've called for massive cooperation and collaboration as being one of the solutions to get us out of this coming crisis. But even that's a little naive. I mean, stand by for our forecasts because we're not going to, we don't have any cut cards, and we're going to kind of tell it the way that our economic models show it. And it's not good. It's just not good. So stand by for that. Again, appreciate you guys. I'm going to have to hop. Anything else I can do, please let me know, okay?
Looking forward to it and give those interns my regards and tell them I can't let them leave when the semester is over. And I enjoyed the time I spent with them last week while I was in D.C.
Thanks again now.
Take care, Bill. Shawnee, you got any closing remarks?
Yes. My closing remark is you're going to have to pronounce her name right. It's Kamala, not Kamala.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. No disrespect intended there. Kamala, I'm going to work on that.
Yes.
And, my
Kamala.
wife might not be so happy about that either because
She
went to Howard. She's a Bison, so they all stand together. And again, that's about that cultural competency in those Howard Bisons. when you see them, you like, "Ain't you?" And they all scream,
Right.
So that's again cultural competency that we always try to make sure that we are aware of. Click on us, like us. What's that other stuff you need to do so we can get our numbers up? Subscribe.
Yes,
subscribe.
subscribe.
Our goal is
share.
to get to 10,000. We're going to get to 1 million, but we're going to do it 10,000 at a time. So like us, review us, follow us. We'll be continuing to move forward with our podcast. Our one of our upcoming episodes are some of the people who have suffered from appraisal bias, and we'll be talking about that and theft of property and value. So again, thank you all for showing up for the 10K podcast. I'd like to sincerely thank Rick Clear for putting on another awesome production. Bill and Shawnee, I couldn't be more pleased than working with the two of you and look forward to our upcoming podcast. Everybody, have a good rest of the day, and thanks again.